Hey, family. You know, it's really hard when you want something so bad and you can see it. It's like right there, but you have to wait. Matter of fact, you don't just have to wait, but you have to face all of these trials and tribulations on the way while God is grooming you for the process to get ready to do what He's called you to do. You know, can you imagine what David went through? David was a little kid and he was anointed to be king of Israel by Samuel, but it wasn't his time yet. He had to wait, and this guy named King Saul, who was jealous of him, who tried to kill him, who David spared his life. He could have took him out and been king a couple times, but he said no. He didn't want to lay hands on the Lord's anointed. He gave his problems and he gave them to God, and trusted God, and just was faithful, and he served and did what he was supposed to do. And then one day in battle, Saul died, and somebody comes up to David. And this is what happens. It says in 2 Samuel chapter 1 verse 6, it says, a young man who told him said, by chance it happened to be on Mount Gilboa. And there Saul leaning on a spear, behold, the chariots and the horsemen were close upon him. When he looked behind him, he saw me and called to me. And I answered, here am I. And he said, who are you? He said, I answered, I am a Amalekite. And he said to him, stand beside me and kill me, for anguish has seized me, and yet my life still lingers. So I stood beside him and I killed him before I was sure that he could live after he had fallen. And I took the crown that was on his head and his armlet that was on his arm, and I have brought them here to my Lord. So what he thinks he's doing, he thinks he's handing the crown to David, and he's going to get this reward and this prize. But that's not how David operated. No. David operated the right way. He gave it to God and not to handle himself. And David did spare his life. So when this guy took his life, but not knowing whether he would have survived or not, and took his life in his own hands, David responds in verse 11. Then David took hold of his clothes and tore them. It's a form of lamenting. And you'd be surprised that he would be lamenting over this, but he was. And so did all of the men who were with him. And they mourned and they wept and they fasted until evening for Saul and for Jonathan, his son. Which, remember the close friendship they had. And for the people of the Lord and for the house of Israel, because they had fallen by the sword. And David said to the young man and told him, where do you come from? And he answered, I am a son of a sojourner, an Amalekite. And David said to him, how is it that you were not afraid to put out your hand to destroy the Lord's anointed? You see, when God has put somebody in place, you let God handle that. If that person needs discipline, handle it. But David did things the right way. When this guy took it out of his own hands, well, he thought he was doing a good thing. But it was always more victorious when David was finally crowned, and we'll see that later. So sometimes in your life, when things are right here and you want it so bad, be careful not to try to do it in your own hands. Be careful not to try to take steps to undercut the person in front of you so you can jump up in their place. Be careful not to harm or touch the Lord's anointing. Be patient, because if God has called you to it, all those seasons you went through, the trials and tribulations, that was just preparation. So maybe you wouldn't be like the person who's in charge right now. Maybe God would use you in a more powerful way, but you had to learn some lessons first. All right, family. You guys have a blessed day.